Um, this is my attempt to learn about people who are using social media really well in the space of sharing the gospel. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church. I'm a millennial who has tried to ferret out and search new ways to share the gospel and uplift the members, which is one thing that I don't think we always talk about on social media. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm trying to seek out people who are doing social media as a Mormon and to share and spread the gospel very well. So tonight, I'm talking with Grady, who runs This Mormon Life, which is a lot of things, and it's very interesting, the presentation and his approach to social media. And I just had a chance to be on his podcast, and he shared an interesting story of why he got into this stuff. And we'll start there in just a second. But Grady, welcome to this official, not a podcast or whatever this is. Two dudes hanging out, maybe.
It's officially unofficial.
Yes. Oh, and you even put up a nice logo for yourself and your headers, or your name place. That's great. I did not know you could do that. So you're way ahead of the game here. I'm just the guy here to interview you, I suppose. So before we, and I'll try to make it brief, as brief as I can, because you're so good at this. I want to pick your brain, and forgive me if it goes on a while, but tell me a little bit about you and who you are, and just kind of your background and experiences in the church. I mean, and I know that's a broad question, but just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So again, my name's Grady. The website that I write for is this-mormon-life.com. And, I was raised in the church. I've always been a faithful member of the church, but I just saw that sometimes culturally there's little areas where there's gaps, and it's, it's culturally as us as members where, maybe we're just not there yet. And so I thought, what can I do to be a positive voice in this area, especially because if you are searching online, there are so many negative voices about anything, particularly about the church. And so I wanted to make sure that there was a place that people can go to if they did have a question about something, if they were trying to get more out of a Sunday school lesson, do better family home evenings, have scripture study that kids want to show up to. What's a place that I can go to get some ideas, or see someone who's trying their best, and sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. And so that's kind of where the website kind of came from. And then as I've been doing that, there's been other additions that we've done to kind of help, reach out to other avenues and specifically.
There you go. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm very interested in, again, sharing your story of how you got into podcasting specifically. Tell me why you do the podcast and why you do it the way that you do it.
So we have a podcast that we do in concert with the website called The Third Hour of Power. And we basically go over the lessons for the Howard W. Hunter Manual. And it really came from the fact that I don't always like going to elders quorum. Sacrament is typically wonderful. Sunday school is awesome. I mean, it's stories. I'm a big history buff. Elders quorum is sometimes a struggle because there are so many important places for us to be able to, be able to dedicate efforts and dedicate leadership. And so I think those most important places are to be with the youth and with the primary. That's pretty controversial, but I think we need strong people in the primary. And so typically elders quorum gets the leftovers. Right. And so I would go to elders quorum, and there would be a teacher there, and he wasn't prepared if he even showed up. And so if he didn't show up, then the presidency was struggling and scrambling. Should we go merge with the high priest this week since we don't have a teacher? And I just thought, I feel like I'm not getting fulfillment out of this hour right now. And that's the whole purpose of going to church, is for us to get fulfillment, for us to be able to feel close to the Spirit, be motivated as men to be better men when we're talking about elders quorum. And so one of the podcasts that I was listening to called This Week in Mormons, they had a sister or an add-on podcast called Sunday School Bonanza, where they talk about Sunday school and, things to help you with the lesson there, especially because Sunday school, that lesson covers like 20 chapters, and there's no way you're going to cover 20 chapters in a lesson. So a lot gets left out. So it really helps to kind of bridge some of that gap, primer for some ideas and talking points. And I thought, what, this also is needed for third hour. And of course, we also cater it towards the Relief Society, and I've got elders that are guests, priests that are guests, sisters who are guests. But the whole idea is that if you're a teacher, you can listen to the podcast and get some ideas to share as you're presenting. If you are someone who is going to class and you don't feel fulfillment because maybe you do have a teacher that's struggling to be able to care about presenting lessons, or just doesn't have the skill set yet and no one's really trained him on how to be a teacher, you can listen and you can get those thoughts pumping in through your head, and you can say, hey, you know what, I listened to the lesson all about family history work, and I'm going to go do some family history work right now. And when I come to the lesson on Sunday, I want to be able to have experiences to share and be part of this conversation, because typically the teacher will ask, hey, has anyone ever found a name, or have you ever felt the Spirit while doing family history work? And you have to take a second and you got to think and say, well, okay, have I ever felt the Spirit? And by the time you're on the very cusp of an idea, the teacher says, nobody? All right, moving on. We've got a lot to get through, so let's just keep going. And you just don't have the time to come up with it. And so if you've had the time to either recollect or create experiences where the Spirit can work on you to help you internalize the topic, you're going to come to class with more to share, and also help to be able to facilitate a discussion in others where all are edified.
Sure. Now, following up on that, drilling down just a hair, the idea is you were dissatisfied with your elders quorum, so you thought podcast. Why was podcasts? Was it just the inspiration from the other ones, or was it just something you thought, oh, I might be good at this? I mean, was there anything more to that decision to run a podcast rather than, stay at home and study the lesson more yourself? Or just kind of dive into that decision a little bit for me.
So I think podcast became the medium just because me and my buddy Scott, we were actually out here in Arizona on a road trip, and we were going home, and he says, and we had already watched, we're getting ready to watch Walking Dead that night. We're trying to get home so we could watch it. And he goes, hey, there's a podcast I listened to all about the show. And I'm like, I don't know what a podcast is. So he puts it on. He has a little iPod shuffle. He puts it on. And it's just these two guys talking about the show. And it was cool because as I listened to the podcast about the show, it helps to enrich the experience of watching the show. I get them talking about things they noticed in the episode that I missed while I was watching. They break down some of the motivations of the characters and sort of a deeper dive into the show. And so, it started with just Walking Dead, and I thought, I like this idea of podcasting. And so I picked up some other ones. One of those was This Week in Mormons, where, there's two guys talking about current events in the church, or two guys talking about Sunday school lessons. And I thought, I enjoy talking about stuff. I enjoy having a conversation. I think this would probably be a good fit for me to help to, one, get this out of my system because I love talking about stuff, but also to be able to help others as well get more out of the lesson.
Sure. Now, stepping away from just the podcast, you do a lot of things and you're on a lot of channels. And it's so tempting for any modern, because you're a marketer. That's professionally, with the conversation we just had offline, you're a marketer. That's what you do. And it's very tempting for marketers to be on all channels, LinkedIn, Medium, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Tumblr. There's millions of channels. Well, probably not millions, but tons of channels that you could be on. Tell me which channels you use specifically, and which have been the most effective at spreading the gospel and achieving your goals.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to social media, I think that there is no silver bullet. Every social media channel seems to have its benefit. For me personally,
Sure.
Facebook has been kind of like my flagship. I have the freedom to say what I want. I can add links to articles people can click on. I'm not limited by character space, but it's not very interactive. Usually stuff gets put out there for people to consume. Sometimes you get a conversation going, but it's a lot of work to get a conversation going. I think when it comes to making connections and conversations, Twitter is great. And that's how you and I got together was through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says something and you reply to it, and it's a very personal interaction. And that's how I got to meet James the Mormon. That's how I got to you get to talk a little bit with Al Fox, is that, because there's people are so accessible there that are I don't like the word celebrity, but people who are influencers in a community.
Sure.
They are accessible, and you can have conversations with everyone, where on Facebook, that's not quite the ability. And then you got Instagram, where that's where I really try to share more family photos of us living our life. Me and the kids, me and my wife, people kind of seeing the Mormon life of this Mormon life. And with those, there's not really a blog post I'm trying to link them back to. It's not really effective for that because I'm too lazy to change the link in the bio every single time I post a picture. And I just feel bad because I feel like if someone wants to find my blog and they go to a blog post about a subject that they had no idea they were clicking on, I haven't quite internalized that process yet. But they all have got.
It takes a lot of time too.
Yeah, this is something I do as a labor of love. If it was my full-time job, if I was Gary Vaynerchuk, yeah, you bet that link in the bio would always be updated because I got a crew of 20 people managing it for me. But it's just
I know. Well, and you could be, maybe you're the Mormon Gary Vaynerchuk.
There we go.
There's space there in the
potty
market.
mouth.
Much less. Let's talk about. There's so much to unpack in all of this in your approach. Actually, let's go to, this is weird because Instagram is not my favorite thing in the world. I do like pictures. I like looking at other people's pictures. But the fact that it is not functional for somebody to link or to go directly to your product or your blog or your podcast or whatever bugs me to no end. And I know they do that on purpose, right? I mean, they have a goal for everything that they do. But
especially
I think
now that
there's value.
You can buy the ability to click, and so it's very smart model.
Of course. Yeah, I did not know that was update, but yes, that is very intelligent. Yeah, great, fantastic. So now my boss will want me to spend money on that tomorrow. I won't tell him that because he doesn't understand Instagram and that. I'm going to keep it that way. But I think that there's value, and I'd like you to comment on this. I think that not everybody understands, Mormonism is still a young faith. It's still one that's maybe because of whether it's, just a general lack of understanding or myths created when Mitt Romney ran for president in 2012 or other, media distortions of who we are and what we believe. There's a lot of questions and a lot of maybe misinformation about who Mormons are, what we believe, and what we do. Have you found either Instagram or other outlets particularly effective at showing people that we're just normal people who believe in Christ and just want to spread our love? Because I know that was one of the things that my state kind of got into the social media thing a little bit, and then it died, and that's a long story. But that was one of the things that they thought would work, is to show people. I'm curious to hear your experiences with that, because it seems like you might have dabbled in that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and there's a big difference between, talking about yourself as an individual and talking about, yourself as a brand. Whereas this Mormon life is a brand. It's authentic brand. I mean, it really is who I am. It's not like it's a character, but it's a brand that kind of helps to guide members or assist members in what they're doing to share the gospel online, but it is also there to be a bit of an example of what a Mormon family is like. And so Instagram is great for that as a brand, to share just your authentic self. And it's hard because people have tried to capitalize on that concept And there's a lot of negative things out there right now where people are kind of sharing their story of, yeah, I don't actually go to any of the places I say I'm at. I just take a picture near sand at the park and say I'm in Barbados, because this company wanted me to wear their bathing suit, on the sand. And so there's people that are doing that the wrong way. And so I think it's important that with anything you do on social media, that it's authentic, that you're not being fake. It doesn't mean you need to be always down and say things are awful. And things can always be happy. I mean, for the most part, I live a charmed life. Yeah, we go through trials and we have hard times, but with faith in the gospel and in Jesus Christ, I can face those hard things with a positive outlook. And so as an individual, I think Facebook is a great place to share those experiences with people, because you do have more space to write, where Instagram is kind of a photo and a quick blurb. Here's us at the beach. Nice. But if you want to share the story about how you lost your child and 3 people came and saved him because he was buried underneath the sand, which happened last weekend, that's a story that's great on Facebook, especially, when it's something that helps you and draws you closer to God. We had a daughter who had a lot of health difficulties at first, and the doctors thought that she had a terminal condition, and that's what we were bracing ourselves with. And so we were sharing our updates on Facebook, and we were sharing and asking for prayers on her behalf, for procedures and going for doctor's visits. And those are things that, because Facebook is designed as an individual to be connecting to your family and your friends, as they see the way that faith has an impact in your life and how you can face hard times with hope, then they're going to want to say, I wish that I had that kind of faith. I want to know why it is that they're talking about their daughter maybe passing away, and why they aren't just beside themselves with grief. What is it that's making them feel that way?
So I want to touch it, and I'm so thankful that you led into that conversation and that kind of discussion about being authentic, the way that you did, because there are studies that come out, and just keep the churn of social media, and people who write about social media, they'll notice, or they'll explain or kind of reveal studies that suggest that there's depression or anxiety caused because we see on social media, a lot of the times we see everybody else's best. We see them doing, vacations, or when they buy a new car, when they graduate from college, when they, have baptisms in their family, or their kids leave on missions. But we don't always see the worst. And for social media, a lot of times you keep your worst off because you feel that it's inappropriate to share. So can you expound a little bit more on the idea of sharing authenticity, or being authentic without being, because everybody knows that person that is too negative on Facebook or on social media. They're always negative. They're sharing just, it's, they've got a cloud over their head, and you just don't want to be around them. But nobody is happy all the time. Nobody is just roses and buttercups and vanilla ice cream all the time. So how do we blend that as people who want to inspire others and humbly show our faithfulness without being negative, but still being authentic? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And think about that in real life situations. Even though Facebook is virtual, and the people that are on the other side are real people. And so you think about, if you were having a hard day, what would you do? Would you keep it inside? Would you keep it to yourself? Or would you reach out to a friend? Or would you reach out to a group of friends, or your home teacher, your visiting teacher? And what is your conversation like? Are you just going to gripe and rant about how, your kids just don't listen and they won't clean their room, and how much you hate it? I mean, no matter how awesome your friend is, they're going to get sick of that. But
Yeah.
if you go there and say, hey, I've got a problem where my kids aren't cleaning their room, they don't listen, they're being disrespectful, they're going out all hours of the night and not coming home. What have you guys done to help? Because I love my son, I love my daughter, I'm concerned about her. Can you guys help me come up with some ideas to help them, help us get through this. And so that, yeah, you can talk about hard times that you're having, but it should be focused around finding solutions and not just griping and ranting, because people don't like it on Facebook and they also don't like it in real life. And it's not that they want you to keep your hard trials to yourself and their fair weather friends, but it's just negative. And so you can share bad things in a positive light. Or if it is something that doesn't live on Facebook, but once you get to the other side of it, you can say, hey, I hope we had a hard time this month, and then share how you came through on the other end and have some uplifting, some faith-promoting experience, so that people can say, wow, I can see where you guys went through a hard time and how blessed you guys are now to be on the other side of it. Or if it's not a good ending, they can at least be there for support and to say, hey, I could use some prayers right now.
So one of the things that I think that we suffer from, just to kind of not add on to that, but kind of keep that stream going. One of the things that I think that we suffer from as members of the church, and people generally, but typically, the circle that I run around with in my ward and wards that I've been in, is that sometimes we are unwilling to accept the help that people would offer. We deny people the opportunity to serve us. I haven't always felt like this. I've been prideful. In fact, when I moved here I actually live outside of Boise. When I moved here, I didn't call the elders quorum president. I didn't call the bishop. I didn't call anyone because I knew I'm a strong dude. I can do it myself. Do you think that, especially among the older crowd that isn't quite as open with technology and might be a little bit more skeptical of being open with technology, do you think that there's some unwillingness, either right or wrong, to share our needs and share our struggles? And if so, how do you think we overcome that? And should we overcome that?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of 2 points that you touched on there. One is technology-wise, should we be sharing our personal things? But then the other part of that is the idea of, if I just use my own experience with this, is showing vulnerability. On the podcast a couple months back, we talked about, I think it was with Camille, we were talking about tithing, and I was just sharing that, there was a time where we were living paycheck to paycheck. We were in Orange County, California, and it's very beautiful and very lovely and very expensive. And our bishop was wonderful, and one of the things that he asked us was, how are you guys doing financially? And I'm like, yeah, we're doing great, Bishop, and we're doing okay. And he's like, okay, well, if you guys ever need anything, would you ask us? And me and my wife, at the exact same time, she says yes, and I say nope, like just point blank. I just said, nope, I wouldn't, because there's a pride in me,
Yep.
and it's not good pride. I'm not trying to say I'm proud of myself that I did a good job taking care of my family. It's pride. Sure. Of, I don't want to appear weak, and I want to say that I can do this by myself. And so it took some humility when I did find myself where I did need help, and I had to go to the bishop and ask for assistance. And so when it comes to actually putting ourselves out there and appearing vulnerable, it takes humility. It takes humility that trusts that I've got a need or something that I'm trying to get support on, and I'm putting myself out there in the hopes that someone can help support me in this, and also so that someone else who's going through the same trial can know that they're not alone.
Right.
And well, I think that's important.
And just continuing that too, is social media, if you at least cast it the right way, whether it's a personal status update or a tweet, tweets might not be effective in this area, but a Facebook status update, is that the right place to share this kind of stuff when you do have a need?
I think it can be. I think it just comes back to is who your network is. If you're, I think sometimes it's not always comes across when you've got kind of a following of nameless, faceless names. Or if you've got, your Facebook friends list is all these people who you don't really know personally. If you've got a tightly knit Facebook, I don't know what you call your own Facebook friends, but if you've got a
just call it your crew, right?
Yes, yes. Hashtag squad. If you got a good squad and on Facebook, I think there's nothing wrong with sharing that. It depends on how personal it is.
Right.
One of my good friends, his sisters got in a car accident and they lost their son. And so he put it out there so people knew about it, and just kind of just then shared, his hope in the atonement and knowing that that he'll see him again. Um, and I'm not appropriate about that at all. To be able to say, here's a hard thing that happened to me, but here's where I find hope. That's a great message to share with everyone. And if it's more personal, like, hey, I don't want to live anymore, maybe we focus that in on people who are the best equipped to help, and maybe not
Sure.
put it to the internet at large, because we probably aren't going to get the best responses.
Yeah. Well, and I was discussing this whole topic with my wife, and I've done a Google Forms survey just to kind of get my own thoughts brewing as I go into this book project. And I didn't even consider this because it's just, I don't know, I just didn't think about it, is sometimes we can, I guess social media and being so public with our problems can create, it's a double-edged sword, right? So you have knowing, which allows people to serve and gives them the opportunity, so you can serve, but you also have this weird dynamic where you have slacktivists, right? Those are the people that, you're going to, this is typically a political term, right? Where to solve a world ill, you share a sign with a hashtag on it, like "Bring Back Our Girls" or something like that, where you show support, but it doesn't actually do anything.
I'm
And
glad I know
sometimes,
about that. Back to life.
yes, yes, but it's weird because my mom was talking to me about it. She said, well, I knew about a friend's mom that passed away, and we weren't best friends, but we were good acquaintances. And she posted, or he posted, or whoever posted about her mom passing away. And normally I would have sent flowers, but I just hit like or wrote something on a status update, and that was it. So I guess I'd never considered that yes, it helps us know more and be able to serve more, but it also makes us, or can create a situation where we become lazy. Is that your experience? And if so, how do we, as the receivers of maybe requests for help or that type of stuff, how do we avoid becoming slacktivists within our own ward or in our own social circle?
Yeah, and just the same thing with my friend. He shared that tragic news, and I didn't know how to respond. Like, I didn't want to like his status, because that didn't seem appropriate. I didn't want to, comment on there, because I just felt like, and I guess I just need to think back of when you're in that moment, what do you need? When you're sharing that, and I can't think of a time where I was sharing something so damaging. But are you looking for people to tell you that they love you? Are you looking for people to get angry with you? Because that's the thing too, is that you want to feel like you've been acknowledged. And if that's the very minimum that we do, I think that's something. Definitely, it's not an excuse, and I don't think it's the be all end all. But I think sometimes people put things out there just because they need validation, to know that, hey,
Sure.
people know that I'm having a hard time. And I think those of us who are active and are service minded will jump in on it and serve. I think those of us who wouldn't do anything probably wouldn't do anything either way. And so,
Hmm.
and that was the
Okay.
thing. I was like, I don't want to just like it or comment back, because I would like to do something more meaningful, but I just didn't know what the right response was, or what to do to help.
Right. Well, it seems like a lot of the answers to any questions about social media, whether it's sending a message or receiving a message and acting on it, a lot of it is you have to gauge your response appropriately, I think, or your message, because there is a way, if somebody dies, or if you have a personal tragedy, there is a way to message that, I think, correctly, so that it doesn't, this is going to sound weird, but maybe it doesn't come off like you're just begging for attention,
Uh-huh.
or you're just crying wolf or whatever.
Vague booking.
But yeah, oh my gosh, yeah,
How
subtweeting is
how
my
could you
favorite
do
too.
that to me? I can't, oh, there's a whole post about all these types of posts that people do on Facebook, and one of them was like, where you call out some mystery person in a post to everybody. Like, how could you do that to me? I can't believe you. Don't you know how much this hurts? And it's like, why would you put that on Facebook? How should I, as I'm assuming not the intended recipient, respond to this?
I can honestly say that I have never vague booked, and I don't think I've ever seen somebody in my own feed vague booking, but I have seen it, of course, across the interwebs, and it is hilarious. For anybody who might not be familiar with the ins and outs of social media or Facebook, and you want to learn more about it, step one is don't ever vague book or subtweet. Subtweet you can get away with a little bit easier because the Twitter just flows so fast you can kind of forget about stuff. But don't vague book; it's the worst.
What's the subtweet? I don't know that one yet.
So basically, it's the same thing as vague booking. I actually didn't know the full-on term for vague booking, but it's where you basically say something to somebody without saying it. So a lot of times politicians or other reporters. I work in a political space. I'm a journalist and stuff, and they will say something like area journalist is total jerk, or area journalist steals my parking spot, or it's where you're taking a shot at somebody, but you don't quite have the guts to actually say it to their face.
To their face.
Some of them, yeah, their face. Yeah, I like that. And some of them are kind of funny, but it's just after a while, it's just like, okay, just grow up, and if you want to attack somebody on social media, go ahead, whatever, do it. But I mean, there's plenty of vitriol out there, and that's another thing that I wanted to bring up with you is obviously we've been counseled by President Bednar Elder Bednar and a few others. Actually, Quentin L. Cook issued a post on Facebook today about the online vitriol and anonymous commenting and some other things that it was very interesting post and very relevant and very important for our time. But besides the dangers that we've been counseled on the internet at large, pornography, other, music that might be unholy, illegal downloading, just stuff like that. What are some dangers associated with social media that we may not necessarily be obvious to us? One example might be the tendency, and this one's bad for me, but the tendency to use Facebook at inappropriate times, like during the sacrament or during church, where I should be paying attention. But do you have any thoughts on social media behaviors that might be dangerous to us spiritually? Maybe not a sin, but maybe just something that we should try to avoid.
Well, and I think in the same vein of using the gospel or the social media to help share the gospel and the way that people are emboldened by some of the anonymity of social media is that a lot of times people might post something that we disagree with. Maybe they're posting something about same-sex marriage or a political candidate, or right now a real hot button is all Black Lives Matter thing. I mean, there's all kinds of horrible things that are happening right now in our country as a result of tensions that are arising. And no matter where you fall on either side of that spectrum, as a member of the church, we've got a responsibility to be a voice of reason and a voice of calming peace. And so you can disagree with someone, that's okay. But what I have found the most effective use of my social media time is to try and find common ground with them. Try to find peace with someone and say, you know what? I think about Tyler Glenn right now, and Tyler Glenn has a lot of anger right now towards the church, but a lot of that anger comes from a place of hurting. And while I disagree with him, I recognize that pain is real. And so, rather than get angry with him and say Tyler Glenn is the worst, I'm gonna throw away all of my Neon Trees CDs because I don't actually listen to CDs anymore. But instead, I say, you know what? I feel really bad for him. That's got to be really hard what he's going through. And to say, you know what, it's never good to feel that way. And I think James the Mormon did a great job with that. 2 weeks ago, he was our guest on the podcast, and he talked about the song he wrote, Treasure, and it was meant to be a unifier. It was meant to say, hey, you know what? I am sorry that you feel like you're being treated like trash. And I know that God loves you. And so here's a song about how, even though you might feel like trash, there's someone there out there that loves you. And let's get together behind that. So I think that as members of the church, that I think we've got a duty to not bow down and not refrain from sharing our beliefs, but do so in a way that's harmonious, in a way that we can say, hey, you know what? I think that marriage is between a man and a woman. You believe that marriage, is between anyone who wants to get married. But it's nice that at least we feel like marriage is important, that people should be families. I think families are really important. And try to find common ground, because I would say 99.9% of the time, the person you're arguing with, you're not going to convince them to come over to your point of view. And they're probably not going to convince you. But if you guys can find some sort of common understanding, at least you can find respect for each other. And I think that's where better dialogue can come and hearts can be softened.
Very good. Very good. I love that answer, because there is just so much. And Elder Cook's comment today was about, the anonymity of the internet, and sometimes keyboard cowboys or keyboard commandos.
I like that.
And the online rage brigade. We forget that there are humans behind the keyboard, and I am completely guilty of this myself. Again, working in the political arena, and being a conservative is sometimes tough. And I'm not mansplaining or white-splaining or conservative-splaining right now, but it's tough because we stand for certain things, and liberals have different views, and that leads to this. And so sometimes just being able to even just standing down and just saying, I don't have time to fight today. Let's see if we can have a rational discussion another day, or even engaging that person behind the scenes, taking the discussion somewhere else besides the public sphere, because we all know, we've heard stories of missionaries who Bible bash with the Baptist preacher in Alabama or whatever, and nothing good ever comes of that. And what we're doing, I think, in essence, is online Bible bashing, and there's nothing that's going to come of that. You're not going to win over hearts. You're not going to win over souls. You're not going to bring people, even if your objective is just to bring people closer to Christ or to make them feel love and peace. There's nothing there. Because of course we know the spirit of contention is the antithesis of Christ. So that's a very good point.
And so there was a time, and this is probably the turning point where it kind of helped me. Now, I will say, in case anyone does any cyber sleuthing, I'm a pretty snarky guy, and I like to say funny things that I think are hilarious. Sometimes they're at other people's expense, and sometimes I am very sarcastic with people. I'm not perfect at what I'm saying is the best thing to do. So if you ever go through my Twitter handle, you'll see me get into it every once in a while. I will say that never ends well, and someday I'll learn my lesson. But the place that I really learned that was as a missionary. We were in a home, and I was, I think, 2 months as a missionary, and we were in this guy's home, and it was one of those referrals where it was like, here's where my coworker lives. Go track into him. One of those kind of referrals. Boy. And so we're in his home. So I'm already thinking like, hey, we should make sure we're doing a good job presenting ourselves as missionaries so that we don't damage this relationship, even though he doesn't know that we know him. But we can say, oh yeah, I talked to some missionaries from your church. They were nice guys. Instead, they got into this huge argument, my companion and him, and he's got his scriptures and he's punching them he's saying, it's the blood, and I'm a son of Abraham, so I'm going to be rich. And my companion's like, well, no, because in this verse here, it says that, and you don't understand. And I'm just, brand new missionary, like, what is happening? This is awful. and so I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden he looks at me and he's like, what do you think about this prophet of God? And I, as any new missionary can do, the only thing he really has in his quiver right now is a testimony. And so that's what I shared. I share my testimony, how I knew that that Joseph Smith was a prophet, that he was called to restore Jesus Christ Church, that it was lost, and he wants to bless his children, so he's made it available to us. And that I knew that he was called of God to help us grow closer to Jesus Christ. And it was silence in the room, and I felt the Spirit. And so I could only assume that he felt the Spirit. And my companion must have been feeling the Spirit, because he followed up with, and that's why you need to read the Book of Mormon. And then it was another hour of angry arguing, and I just sat back and I'm like, this is the worst thing we could have done to help this person grow closer to Jesus Christ. And it was funny because I served in that area a few months after my companion left, and I saw him a month or two later, and it was funny because he saw me, honked his horn, and ran over and gave me a hug. He's like, "Hey, it's so great to see you," and I'm so glad. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if just because he's just a nice guy, or I'm hoping is that he at least had good feelings towards me. That at least my humble testimony was enough to say, hey, they're not all here to argue with me. There's some that firmly believe what they're saying, and that seems to bring them happiness, because he was happy to, I mean, he didn't have to stop. I mean, he's a FedEx driver. And so it wasn't like we were in his neighborhood. He was out working, and he saw us, honked a horn and waved, and I came to say hi, gave me a hug. It's so great to see you. How have you been? And and that was, totally not what I expected. I'm like, oh, Elder, I think we're gonna get in trouble here, But I think that even though we don't have to agree with everyone, if we can at least have a good conversation and share what we feel is important to us, hopefully they'll respect us enough to say, I can see that brings you happiness. Best of luck to you.
Well, and I think again, nobody is perfect in this arena, and quite frankly, I can admit that I'm pretty bad sometimes on Twitter, just because I get in political arguments, and it's just, it's an impulse. Maybe it's an addiction, and I need to go to addiction recovery for it.
Oh yeah, I've been like, what are you doing on your phone? Arguing on the internet.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, you could be playing with your kids, and instead you're trying to convince somebody that you're right on the internet.
Yeah,
cool. But I think one thing that we have to remember is that, just like in our I guess real life, not our digital life, we're always planting seeds. Are we planting them for good and giving people a good impression of saints, or are we planting them for bad and maybe shutting off future opportunities for missionary work that we will never ever know about? But maybe somebody that we interact with online in 5 or 10 years has a Mormon neighbor, and they don't interact with that Mormon neighbor because they think, hey, there was this Mormon 5 years ago on the internet who was just the biggest jerk, and I want nothing to do with them. And conversely, hey, this Mormon, we may have disagreed on this political issue, which seems to be the big dividing line. Politics and religion, of course, you never talk about those, but we talk about them all the time online. 5 years down the road, maybe, hey, we had this respectful discourse, and yeah, Mormons are more, I don't necessarily want to be Mormon, but I can hang out with them, and it's just, we're planting seeds all the time, and we'll never see the fruit of all of our labors. So that's why we just got to do our best. I want to follow up, and just a few more questions. I know it's getting late where you are, where I am, but just a couple more questions to kind of tie up some loose ends. You obviously, there in social media and as a marketer in your professional life, there are 6 ways from Sunday to measure everything that you do. And in the professional world, your boss wants you to be able to show impact, show return on investment, stuff like that. Now, your return on investment is a little bit different. It's kind of souls uplifted, people who might be having more spiritual thoughts during the week, or better, like you said earlier, better discussions and thoughts during third hour, Elders Quorum Relief Society, whatever. But that doesn't always give into good measurement. Do you measure what you do? And if so, how do you gauge if you're successful at your projects, your blog, your podcast, your social media efforts to spread the gospel?
So I've got metrics that I try to keep an eye on. Like, I try to see how many people download the podcast episodes. I try to promote my page views, make sure that they're healthy amounts, because I do want to make sure that my message is getting out there. But really, how I quantify the value is not in so much the numbers; it's in the souls, and it's people that reach out to me with some sort of experience that they've had. And one of my favorites that I've had is one of our followers. His name's Brian, and he's not a member of our church, but he's been listening to the podcast and following the blog. And one of our episodes, we were talking about family night and what a blessing it is to my family to be able to have a time where we push everyone else out, and it's our time as a family to grow closer together and to focus on God. And so he shared about how he and his family tried family night, and it didn't go perfectly, and I told him they never do. But just the fact that I was able to help him grow closer to his family, to say, hey, I want to also have a close relationship with my kids. I'm going to try something new. That's where I find value in what I do. It's people who are trying to make change in their lives to grow closer to their Savior or go closer to their family or just to be a better person in their community. When I get feedback like that of people that are finding that, that's my gold. That's what gets me the energy to get up and keep going. When I'm like, oh, page views are down. No one liked my last Facebook photo I shared. When I get then someone to say, hey, I felt the spirit when you talked about these things, or you know what, I shared what you talked about on my lesson and it was really helpful for the discussion and everyone really liked it. It just all of a sudden energy again. I'm like, that's right. This isn't about page clicks. It isn't about downloads. And I think we think about the same idea with home teaching, is that home teaching isn't about 100%. It's about being in the homes of the members of our quorum or our ward or our class, if we're talking about Relief Society, is we're trying to touch lives. And of course, 100% home teaching enables us to be able to touch more lives than 5% home teaching. But we don't want to get lost in the numbers. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the souls that we're touching through our efforts.
Right. And I think for a long time, I was, I try to be a good Mormon. I try to do my best, always go to my meetings, take the sacrament, repent, read as much as I can, again, busy life and 2 kids, and one of them who is 2 and does not sleep still. So it's always a struggle. But the one lesson that I actually had a life-changing lesson about 3.5 years ago. I was sitting in Rigby, Idaho, in a ward, and for some reason the lesson or the sacrament talk just stuck out to me, of not going through the motions. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a lot of, sometimes in church, there's a lot of checking the boxes, and it sounds like not checking the box just to check the box, but checking the box for the experience, and so that we're living in the moment. And kind of being there is kind of, it's great to have the page views. It's great to have traffic, especially if you need ad revenue to pay for whatever. But that, at the end of the day, page views aren't necessarily what matter, but experiences and changing hearts and uplifting people, that's what matters. Is that kind of a good take on that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's to help and to bless the lives of others. It's to say, hey, like I said earlier, I've lived a charmed life. I don't have the hardships of other people, and so if there's something that I can do to help someone alleviate their suffering or help them solve a problem that they're dealing with, then I'm glad to help. Because although part of the blessings that I have, I think, are just because heaven smiles on me, a lot of the blessings that I have are because I was raised by good parents, because I married a wonderful woman, because I try my best to live the gospel. And so even though some things happen are really hard, my outcome on them is that I'm still blessed. Even though I've gone through hard trials and things don't go my way all the time, I'm still blessed. And I think that, if anyone who's going through a hard trial can at least see that, hey, even in the hard times, we can have joy in the journey. That's really my gold.
Very good. Okay, so one and a half last questions.
Yeah.
The church has been, and thank you for being on so long. I know, you're a busy guy, but I appreciate this, because this is good for people to see, but this is gonna be great content for the book. And once it finally gets out, hopefully
I can't wait to read it.
Year. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Your face will be right there, smack dab on the middle, right behind the microphone. But there's a lot of, the church has been, I think, made strides in recent years, and this is a subjective opinion, of course, has made strides in recent years to integrate social media into the LDS experience, whether it's, just putting even the little LDS hashtag at the starting screen of conference, or Elder Bednar's, kind of his magnum opus on social media. There was a talk, Elder Bednar was talking to new mission presidents last week, and he said something to the effect of, hey, don't be afraid of these social media tools. And so the church, I think, is trying to lead this change in behavior, or change in attitude towards social media, as we, the more, we have more millennials in the church, that, people who are more adept at technology, who are very open to sharing the gospel online if they know how. So the question is I guess it's a two-part question. Number one, for anybody who's interested in sharing the gospel or uplifting the saints and their community members, what advice would you give to people who maybe are willing but don't necessarily have the know-how? And part two of that question is a little different, but where do you see social media advancing for members of the church generally? And again, I'm not asking you to see the future, but is there an opportunity or a place where the saints can really make a difference, using either existing tools or maybe something that's coming? So I know that's very open-ended and very, I don't know, just kind of a big loaded question to answer, but I'd love to get your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, I'll be like Donald Trump. I'll hear your question and then say what I want anyways.
There you go. I love it.
So one of the things you talked on was just the idea of the changing nature of missionary work. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, there was culturally an understanding that when a stranger knocked on your door, you invited them into your home. They had dinner with the family. You had, maybe, this is probably more 100 years ago, but you had a little fund of cash that if they needed money on their way, you would give them money to say, hey, here's something to get you to your next stop on the road. Those days are over. I would never, ever let my wife invite a stranger into the home. And missionaries, you should never go into a home of a woman by herself. But people don't do that anymore. It's very, very difficult. It was hard enough for me 15 years ago on mission to get into a door. It's even harder now. That method of missionary work is sunsetting. The way that we are able to now make connections with people that we don't know is through social media. That's where people have got their doors open, sometimes wide open, letting anyone come in and see what's going on.
Yeah.
But
too open.
Yeah, but that's where the new ground is for people to make connections and to meet. That's where it's at. And so for our missionaries, they need to be able to be well versed to have good, meaningful conversations. And we saw that a little bit when the missionaries first started using Facebook. They were kind of copying and pasting LDS.org stuff. Now, it's good to share those things. It definitely is, but it can't be all you share.
Yes.
The missionaries who got it right were the missionaries who were sharing their life as a missionary. The missionaries who were sharing funny things that they were up to, like those, lip dubs to, songs or redoing songs as Book of Mormon theme. I mean, just little cute things like that, just to help get the idea out there. But the whole idea is, who are these missionaries? Who are these children coming down to my town? And it's just the idea that that's how we can make new connections. That's how we can let people know who we are and have a conversation where that's not going to happen on the doorstep anymore. And as members of the church, we need to do the same thing. It's not so much of copying and pasting whatever LDS.org shares. Now, there are wonderful things that LDS.org shares, and so I don't want you to think that don't do that. Their videos about Jesus Christ during Easter and during Christmas are powerful. But if that comes out of the blue and people don't even know that you believe in Jesus Christ, it's going to be awkward. Or if that's all you ever share on your social media, it's going to be awkward. But if people know you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if they know that you follow him, if they know how the gospel's impacted your family, then sharing a video like that is a natural progression. Like, oh, of course, Grady's going to share a video during Easter about Jesus Christ. He's a Mormon. He believes in Jesus Christ, but it comes from us sharing authentic experiences that we have with our Heavenly Father. Because there's a phrase that I loved. It was that you might be the only scriptures they ever read. And when it comes to our scriptures, what our scriptures are, it's the stories of people and their interactions with God. And so if they can find that through social media with members of the church, they're going to get closer to God than they would without it.
That's very interesting. I had never heard that phrase, but I love it because you're right that, sorry, that's a really cool phrase. And back to,
Make sure that one goes on the inside jacket.
Yeah, that's going to be never mind. That'll be the or something like that. But you do risk, you do have to be, and it goes back to the authenticity thing. You can't overshare. In fact, there have been people in my life, I won't say who because I'm fairly close with some of them, but during political elections, I will actually unfollow them on Facebook, stay friends, but unfollow them so I don't see their stuff, because it's like, hey, I know you're voting for Mitt Romney. I got it. You shared the same post 400 times yesterday, and I don't want to see it 400 times today. But at the same time, you shouldn't be afraid to mix your authentic life with your sharing of the gospel. I think, have you seen the 12-step video series that the Mormon channel put out a couple months ago?
I saw a few of them. It's always hard because we watch Mormon channel as a Sunday afternoon activity, and it's hard because it's the number 12. It's the first thing that comes up. And it's like, I've got kids from aging in 2 years old to 11, and the first video is like overcoming pornography. And I'm like, that's not a conversation that all my kids are ready for right now. And so I typically have gone past them, but I've watched a few of them, and I like that they are talking so openly about a very difficult and heartbreaking issue.
And I don't encourage everybody to, obviously, and not everybody has the capacity and capability to do it. I don't encourage everybody to make a social media post or a video about their own struggles with pornography or with drugs or with binge eating or food addiction or whatever else you might suffer from. But I think that those are actually really good examples of effective sharing done by the church. A lot of times people think, oh, hey, the Mormons are these plastic people, as Glenn Beck would say, amazing, super happy plastic man or whatever, but that don't have problems. They put on their white suit or their white shirts and ties, and they go to church, and everything's just hunky-dory and stuff. And for me, those videos show a different side of the church and its members where, hey, we have problems just like you. We have addictions, we have our challenges, we have our struggles. And if you are watching this, or you by chance have made it this far into this video, go watch those videos. Do not watch them with kids. You're right. Do not watch them with kids, but watch them with your spouse or with friends, or I would even go so far as to say, as long as if you're a quorum leader or group leader in the church, I would find ways to show them, at least some of them, to in church or integrate them somehow, because they're so powerful. They are incredibly powerful because they're authentic.
Topic for a fifth Sunday if your bishop feels it's a need in your ward to incorporate that. And another one that recently came out was the one that kind of builds on Elder Holland's talk, Like a Broken Vessel, where he interviews missionaries and people who had suffered from depression. And one of the guests I had, Chelsea Carr, she was a missionary who came home early due to depression and PTSD. And it was beautiful because, it was great as a guest on the podcast to just talk with her through those things. And then as well as to have her share her experience, have her share that video, because it wasn't out of the blue like, hey, guess what? I have depression, everybody. But since she's been home, has been talking about her journey and talking about how has hard days, but how she gets better and how she knows that God loves her. And then here's this video that's extremely powerful that applies to everyone. It's not just a Mormon video about depression. It's a video that applies to everyone that's having a hard time, that's in this dark night of their soul. They can find a light knowing that God knows who they are and loves them. And if they feel like you're abandoned, that no one's with you, God's with you. And that resonates with people who are her friends because they know her and they know it's something that she struggled with and they've helped her through it. And now here's something that's helped her get through it. And they can go, I want to know more about what's helping her.
And I think, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, not only obviously knowing that God is with you is the most important, and can be, quite frankly, knowing that can be a life or death piece of knowledge. But knowing that, say you're somebody who has depression or suffers from that, sharing that tastefully on your social media feed. We had one in our ward a couple days ago who kind of outlined her struggle with depression and how she's worked through it and how she prayed for help and for guidance and for greater insight into what she's been struggling with. And then all of a sudden for some reason, she had a more acute awareness of the blessings around her. And then in that same time period that she was asking for this guidance and this instruction, there seemed to be more blessings and people stopping by and dropping off presents just randomly. And she's not cured of her depression, but she's learning to, manage it and to have a greater picture of why things happen, and put that in a spiritual context. Now, do I think less of her because she shared that? No, because I'm amazed that she has the strength to share it, and she's giving others. I think the beauty of social media sometimes is that it gives others light to know that they're not alone, know that other people are struggling with the same issues, and that they can succeed, and that you can, whatever your struggle, whatever your issue, you can overcome it with help from your Heavenly Father and with relying on the people around you. And again, it comes down to being able to do it tastefully and appropriately, but there's so much power in being able to let others know that they're not alone, because that's one of the worst illnesses. I think loneliness can just do some crazy things to you.
It exacerbates everything, because
yeah,
if you don't have the Spirit with you, Satan works really hard. And if you don't have friends or a support group or the Spirit to help you, Satan gets to tell you whatever he wants. And and even the sickness that you have in depression, it works at you and you don't have any outlet for that. And so I think it's definitely a great place for people to be able to know where I can go get help.
Sure.
And I think it's a good thing about that video is that it's not just God loves you so you're fixed. It also talks about, getting medication, seeing a professional. It really marries the two of secular medicine and ecclesiastical faith.
Sure. And I think that's a cheery note to end on. No, this has been a great conversation, and I think that is a good place to end, because ultimately, we're told, everything that's good comes from God, and social media can be so good. It can be very bad. It can be horribly, awfully bad, but it can be so good if we make it that way. And I think it's been cool to see people like you and others. I mean, James the Mormon is doing a great job. Mimi Knowles is doing a great job. The piano guys. I mean, everybody. The Sisters in Zion. I mean, it's really cool to see uplifting. And I'm inspired by efforts. My ward is really good at using Facebook. We have an unofficial Facebook group that we use, and it's really cool to see how quickly, we use it so simply. It can be, hey, I need a cup of sugar. Does anybody have that? I'll give you a plate of brownies afterwards. Or it can be something as serious as, hey, we had in our ward last year, we had a family who their son was born with severe heart defects. And we use social media in our own ward group, but also in our community, to raise $10,000 to help defray some of the costs of that. And it's just so cool to see the possibilities. And I think with people like you leading the way, and people like James the Mormon or others, the next generation is going to be even better if we can get it right. And I like to see the church leading the charge on that, but also I want to see more spiritual podcasts and spiritual, Facebook Lives or whatever, because the possibilities are just so numerous if we take the time to capture them and put the thought into it. So
Yeah,
there you
and
go.
even if you don't do it, don't think that you have to do this as a full time or as a 20-hour week commitment. You know, that's I enjoy doing this. It's a great hobby, and I find fulfillment in it. But even if it's just, hey, when I share things online, I want to make sure that I'm being kind, and I want to make sure that I talk about my faith. So even in your own everyday activities, just like you're trying to be, or you're hoping you're trying to be a missionary in your real interactions, be a missionary in your online interactions too.
Very good. And that we will end on. Um, I'm going to close this officially out, but thank you for being with us. Talked just very briefly, like you did with me. Talk about, obviously your URL is there on your nameplate, but where else can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you want to find our website, it's this-mormon-life. And on Facebook, we're /This Mormon Life, Twitter, Instagram @This Mormon Life. And if you want to find our podcast, you can find links to it on our website. But those are the best places to find us and interact. I love hearing people, even if it's just ideas that they have or questions they have. On our website, there's a little chat button where you can chat with me live if I'm near my phone or near the computer. I love talking about the church and about faith.
Very good. Very good. All right. Thank you very much. And I will we'll call it a night. I'm going to stop this right now, and then we'll bid adieu.